In 2008, the world learned the horrifying story of Josef Fritzl. He was an Austrian man who imprisoned his own daughter for 24 years. He R-worded her countless times and forced her to bear 7 of his children. Elizabeth's harrowing escape from her private hell and the incredible strength that she showed in the face of her abuser is something we can all learn from. Hello and welcome back to Crime, Mystery and Mayhem with Kate. If this is your first visit to my channel, hello, welcome. It is great to have you here. Here on my channel I talk about true crime stories because I find them interesting and I'm quite intrigued as to why some people do the horrible things that they do. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel because it would really help me in my attempts to grow my channel. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the crimes that Josef Fritzl committed. He is a horrible individual. Let's jump in. Josef Fritzl Jr. He was born in 1935 in the small city of Amsterdam in Lower Austria. His mum, Maria, she was the illegitimate child of a miller. The miller began many sexual relationships with the maids that were in his home for the express purpose of having children, because apparently his wife was barren, so they couldn't have their own and he wanted kids, and yeah, so he just banged all his maids apparently. So Maria, she was one of these women. Yeah, Maria met a penniless drifter in 1934 called Josef Fritzl Sr., and soon after Joseph Jr. was born. They lived in Amsterdam at this time, about 90 miles from where Hitler was actually born. Fast forward to March of 1938 when the Nazis annexed Austria. This would bring a lot of trouble for the Fritzls and not just for Joseph Sr., who was actually fighting on the Eastern Front during the war. He was also kicked out of the family home by Maria in 1939. Joseph Jr., he apparently saw Hitler on March 7th of 1938. He would go on to blame the dictator and the Nazis, among many other things, for his deranged behavior towards his daughter in later years. So upon returning to Amsterdam, Joseph Sr. was shunned by his wife and his son as a gutless and shameful coward. And Joseph Jr.'s hatred of his father would simmer below the surface for the rest of his miserable life. So Maria, Joseph's mum, she was rather off balance before World War II, and many who knew her said that she wanted a child, but not the associated responsibilities of having a child. She would often beat, berate, and neglect her young son. Her fiery temper actually got her arrested in Austria in 1945 and sent to a concentration camp. But she would subsequently be freed by the Allies after the war, and then she would go looking for her son. So the then 10-year-old Joseph, he was actually left alone for a long period of time. And it's truly astounding how the symbolism of this episode in his then young life would become very relevant later on in this story. But more on that later. Joseph ended up in an orphanage where he was told that his mum was dead. But Maria wasn't dead, and she did manage to find him and get him back. But the abuse did not stop, and it only got more intense after her stint in the concentration camp. She came out more angry. Joseph would stand up to her when he was 15 years old, and it was around this time at 15 that he actually began developing a few deviant sexual habits. He actually began to creep around the streets, and he would perv into people's windows and watch strangers having sex. Yeah, he was that guy. Then he decided to escalate his actions, and he wanted revenge on his mum. Josef Fritzl locked his bedridden mum up in her own attic with the windows bricked up, where she died in 1980. So he went on to do that later. The motivation that Joseph said in an interview with a forensic psychiatrist was simple. He said revenge for all that she'd done to him. In 1951, at the age of 16, Joseph headed to Lyons to begin his studies and on-the-job learning to become an engineer, because back then engineers were in very high demand after the war. 5 years later, he would meet his wife, 17-year-old Rosemary Byers, at the firm where he was working as a technical assistant, and Rosemary's dad actually worked there as well. Joseph would tell his friends that he was very impressed by her and that she would make an exceptional housewife because she shows incredible obedience. So this was a quality that he really liked. We'll talk about it later. By 1963, Joseph and Rosemary were married with 3 children, 2 daughters and 1 son. That year, Joseph was sent by his employer on what turned out to be a 2-year business trip to Ghana. In true narcissistic psychopath form, he would actually divorce Rosemary in 2012, so later, for not coming to visit him in prison. So, going back again, upon coming back home, Joseph's control over his family hit a new fevered pitch, likely as a reaction to his kids growing and having to manage stress. And on April the 8th, 1966, his 4th child was born. This was Elizabeth. The birth of Elizabeth only added more stress to Joseph's life, and he reverted to his old predatory sexual habits, which apparently were dormant, as far as we know, when he was overseas, likely because he had intense direction in his work. But we don't know. He probably did things. I don't know. So Josef Fritzl went to Lyons, where he worked, to get away from the small-time scrutiny of Amsterdam. No one there would question him or view him with suspicion. He would not have to worry there about anything getting back to his wife's ears, although there are real questions regarding what his wife knew when her daughter was enslaved in the cellar. Nor would he have to worry about the prying eyes of law enforcement in his hometown. So Joseph escalated his morbid ways in 1967 when he followed a mother home from the grocery store. So he followed her home. She had a little baby and he R-worded her he had a knife to her. So he R-worded her at knife point in her bed while her baby was asleep in the cot next to it. He was caught and he was given an 18-month prison sentence. 18 months. I know, not long enough. Another bonus that he got, besides this feather-light sentence for a heinous crime, was the Austrian justice system. Effectively, they expunged his R-word conviction from his record after 10 years. This was done with most crimes back then, regardless of severity. By the time that 1972 came around, the Fritzls had their 7th and last child. They had 3 girls and 4 boys. Joseph's reputation as an independently wealthy engineer was growing fast. So he decided to invest in property by buying guest houses, restaurants, and a 40-bedroom, 3-story hotel, where he turned a profit for a while. And when business went south, the hotel mysteriously caught fire. Yeah. Authorities, they weren't able to prove that it was arson or insurance fraud, so I kind of think it was for insurance money, but I don't know. Yet, it would make news again in 2017 when the new owner of one of the properties found a staircase to nowhere and various hidden rooms in the structure. So Joseph would put on the Family Man Act around the people of his town, as other socially competent killers like BTK and Ted Bundy did. People thought he was decent, hardworking, a family man. Little did they know what he was really like. Joseph started a massive expansion to his property, including a huge cellar under the outside rear of the house, and several flats to be rented out were to be built on top. These flats had a very high turnover rate, which in turn contributed to the unquestioning demeanor of the folks in that part of town. So DIY building also came naturally with being an engineer, so no one in this town thought twice about it. Around this time, Joseph began showing extraordinarily obsessive tendencies, some might call it grooming, around his then 12-year-old daughter Elizabeth. and he would demand to know where she was at all times and often spied on her. Creepy. Creepy. These behaviours would ultimately escalate, just as the ones earlier in his life did. In 1981, Elizabeth started a tourism course out of town, and she began to wait tables. You know, a job. She makes money. This only got under her dad's skin and added fuel to the fire of his obsession. Remember, he wanted full control of his daughter, and she was just trying to get away. She also did a gastronomy class, which was the figurative straw that broke the camel's back with her dad. Josef escalated, and he started to expose himself to Elizabeth, leaving pornographic literature under her pillow and all around sexually abusing her. Elizabeth's friends during this time reported an intensely introverted girl at school who they nevertheless knew liked school better than home. Still, no one ever questioned why that was the case. In 1983, Josef Fritzl finished his cellar, which he said was to be used for storage and as a workshop. But we know that's a damn lie. Josef, being the controlling psychopath that he was, built the space to give him maximum possible physical control of his captive. The cellar had lighting and many interconnected rooms. The lighting wasn't actually that great though. In 1983, Elizabeth ran away to Vienna to escape her increasingly scary and controlling dad. But Vienna police, they picked her up, and they held her until her dad made the drive from Amsterdam to collect her, because technically she was a minor. Poor Elizabeth, she was just trying to get away. On the drive back, Josef, he said to her, "I'll never let you run away again." Scary. Elizabeth could have had no idea just how terrifyingly true that statement would turn out to be in little over a year. In May of 1984, Elizabeth made the mistake of telling her dad that she was moving. She was going to go live with her sister. She wanted to get away. This angered her dad, increasing his obsession and fertilizing the seed of desperation in his mind. He would not let it happen again. He could not let it happen again. He would not be left alone again by the woman who got the entirety of his psychosexual mental energy. This is so sick. This is his own flesh and blood, his daughter. How can a parent be sexually interested in their own child? I don't understand. I don't get it. I just don't get it. So Josef would later admit to the psychiatrist from prison that he often fantasized about sexual intercourse and domination of his own mum. So yeah, Josef Fritzl is a very, very sick man. Josef decided that he had to do something to keep his daughter from leaving. He didn't want her to leave. He wanted the control, and she was trying to get free. So on August the 28th, 1984, he called his daughter to the garage at their home. He asked her to help him lift a door. So after that was done, he said to her that he wanted her to join him in his study for a private talk. So she was like, okay. So she went in. This is when Elizabeth's life came crashing down, and her hopes of escaping her dad and his disturbing behavior towards her came to a drastic halt. When Elizabeth's back was turned, her dad knocked her out with a laced rag to her face, then carried her into the cellar and handcuffed and chained her to a ring in the floor. Elizabeth had no way of knowing she would be in that dark, humid, bug and rodent infested place with just a bed, toilet and TV for 24 years. No direct sunlight, nothing. After Elizabeth's disappearance, her mum filed a missing persons report. But that's basically it. That's all her mum did. And then she kind of just went, okay, my daughter's gone. Almost a month later, her dad handed over a letter to the police, the first of several that he had forced Elizabeth to write while she was in captivity. The letter said that she was tired of living with her family and was staying with a friend, and that she warned her parents not to go looking for her, otherwise she'd leave the country. Apparently she joined a cult. Yeah, the letter was like that. So Elizabeth would be R-worded an estimated 3,000 times by her dad over 24 years in that cellar. With that frequency of the R-word happening to her, it was impossible to avoid pregnancy. And her first pregnancy was a miscarriage. Her first live birth was in 1988. This was a little girl that she named Kirsten. From here on out, when the births occurred, her dad gave her a book on childbirth, a rag, a pair of scissors, and a few wet wipes. So she was basically left to do it all on her own. She gave birth a total of 7 times while being totally alone in that pitch dark place, totally devoid of any sunlight. Elizabeth's second child, Stefan, was born in 1990. He would go on to have horrible back pain and misalignment because he was 5'8", and he would have to bend over in the cellar because it was quite low. In August of 92, her third child, Lisa, was born. She was born with a heart defect. Joseph didn't want to take the gamble of his upstairs family hearing a constantly crying, in-pain baby coming from downstairs, so he took Lisa. He put her in a basket and he literally left her on the doorstep of his own property with another phony note from Elizabeth. So it was basically a note saying that, this is my daughter, I need you guys to raise her, blah, 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 and yeah, his wife believed it. So Lisa, she got emergency surgery and by all accounts lived a somewhat normal life with the upstairs family she thought were just her grandparents. Meanwhile, downstairs was getting cramped. So Joseph opened up more space among the rooms and brought in things like a fridge, which apparently he kept stocked. He brought down some toys for the kids, and he apparently even got them a goldfish and a canary. In short, he tried to normalize the hellish situation that he created. Elizabeth attempted her own normality for her kids. She would get them up at the same time every day, cook them breakfast in the tiny kitchen, and even taught them how to read. All this while her dad is still brutally abusing and R-wording her in front of the children. So December 16th, 1994, saw the arrival of baby Monica, and she was taken upstairs, basically in the same manner as Lisa, with another bogus note that Elizabeth was forced to write. At times, Joseph would punish the family in the cellar by shutting off their lights or refusing to deliver food for days at a time. Once again, how did Elizabeth's mum not clue on or push further? I don't know. So in April of 96, Elizabeth gave birth to twins. These were Michael and Alexander. Michael had horrible breathing problems, and long story short, Joseph let him die. A little baby. And then he took his body and he hurled this poor baby's body into the furnace at the property. Like, what the actual hell? Alexander, the other twin, was then taken upstairs in the manner of his older sisters, likely because Joseph thought it too risky to kill him as well. So around this time, Joseph started going on a lot of business trips for weeks at a time, and he would leave food, water, and vitamin supplements for his downstairs family when he was gone. In 2002, Elizabeth gave birth to her 7th and last child by her dad, a little boy called Felix. Number 7 effectively made his downstairs family a grotesque mirrored image of his upstairs family, which is interesting again from a symbolic point of view. It's as if the upstairs family just weren't enough and only stirred Joseph's anger, much like how he stirred his mum's. He was by all accounts a strict, angry man anyway. The unconscious way he saw to remedy this was to have his second family downstairs and controlled exactly how he believed all women and children should be controlled. Joseph became very fond of Felix, and he wanted to get him upstairs and basically integrate both the families. So to do that, he began planning to release Elizabeth in 2008, about the time that Felix would need to start school. He believed the gaslighting he did to Elizabeth was effective enough to deter her from telling the authorities. Like, he would tell her there were gas traps, electrified doors, etc., and like she would get hurt or if she tried to escape. So according to Josef's sister-in-law Christine, he went into the basement every 9 a.m. to apparently draw plans for machines that he was selling. Yeah. She said that he often stayed there for the night and did not allow his wife to bring him down coffee. Obviously, because she would discover that, you know, there's all these kids and her daughter down there. So a tenant who rented a ground floor room in the house for 12 years claimed to hear noises from the basement, which Josef said were caused by the faulty pipes or the gas heating system. Before Josef could put his plan to release the family into motion, 19-year-old Kirsten became deathly ill and almost comatose. All they had in the cellar to treat her symptoms was aspirin. She was suffering from profuse sweating, unusually white skin, and all the symptoms of kidney failure. Elizabeth, she begged her dad to get her daughter medical help and said that if he refused to get her the help and if her daughter died, that Elizabeth would take her own life. So on the 19th of April 2008, Josef agreed to seek medical attention for Kirsten. Elizabeth helped him carry her out of the chamber and saw the outside world for the first time in 24 years. Then he forced Elizabeth to return to the chamber. Kirsten was taken by ambulance to a local hospital, and she was admitted in serious condition with life-threatening kidney failure. Josef later arrived at the hospital claiming to have found a note written by Kirsten's mum. Because remember, everyone thinks that Elizabeth took off and she just dumps her kids on her parents. So he discussed Kirsten's condition and the note with the doctor. The doctors, they were rather confounded by her symptoms, which they were confused, you know, despite having Josef insisting, like, you know, the mum was gone and he didn't know where she was and da-da-da. Kirsten, she'd actually lost a lot of teeth and had developed the habit of tearing her hair out in clumps, shredding her dresses, and she would stuff them down the toilet in the cellar. At the hospital, Josef introduced himself as Kirsten's grandfather, but the doctors, they wanted her mum. They wanted her mum to come in, and they kept asking him to get the mother in there so that they could take an even more thorough history and get a handle of what's happening. Medical staff found aspects of Josef's story puzzling, and they alerted the police, thank God, on the 21st of April. The police broadcasted an appeal on public media for the missing mother to come forward and provide information about Kirsten's medical history. And the police reopened the case file on Elizabeth's disappearance as well. So Josef repeated his story about Elizabeth being in a cult and presented what he claimed was the most recent letter from her, dated January 2008, posted from the town of Carmarthen. The police contacted a church officer and expert on cults who raised doubts about the existence of the group that Josef described. He noted that Elizabeth's letters seemed dictated and oddly written. Elizabeth saw the televised appeal on her tiny TV in the cellar, and when her dad came back, she said to him, "You're going to take me in there or I will kill myself down here." So Josef, he agreed, and upon arriving to the hospital, the police immediately arrested and began to interrogate Elizabeth. See, they don't know what's been happening to her and her kids. It is only when they threatened to take her children away that she finally told them what her dad had done to her for 24 years. So they immediately went and arrested Josef, and they found the kids and they freed the children from the cellar. After his arrest, Josef Fritzl claimed that his behavior towards his daughter did not constitute the R word, but was consensual. Yeah, he's delusional. In talks with his lawyer, Josef said that he always knew during the whole 24 years that what he was doing was not right, that he must have been crazy to do such a thing, yet it became a normal occurrence to lead a second life in the basement of his house. Regarding his treatment of the family he had with his wife, Josef said, "I am not the beast the media makes me out to be." Regarding his treatment of Elizabeth and her children in the cellar, he explained that he brought flowers for Elizabeth and books and toys for the children into the bunker, that's what he called it, and often watched videos with the children and ate meals with Elizabeth and the kids. He's delusional. He said that he decided to imprison Elizabeth after she did not adhere to any rules anymore, basically when she became a teenager, and that is why he had to do something. Like, I have a daughter, she's 17, and she doesn't listen, but I'm not gonna freaking lock her up in a bunker. Anyway, he said, "I had to create a place where I could keep Elizabeth, by force if necessary, away from the outside world." He suggested that the emphasis on discipline in the Nazi era, during which he grew up until age 10, might have influenced his views about decency and good behaviour. So reflecting on his childhood, he initially described his mum as the best woman in the world and she was as strict as necessary. But later he went on to express a negative opinion of his mum and claimed that she used to beat him, hit him until he was laying in a pool of blood. He said, "It left me feeling totally humiliated and weak." He said, "My mum was a servant and she used to work hard all her life. I never had a kiss from her. I was never cuddled, although I wanted to be cuddled. I wanted her to be a good mum to me." He also claimed that she called him Satan, a criminal, a no-good, and that he had a horrible fear of her. In 1959, after Josef had married and bought his house, his mum actually moved in with them. So this is before when I was talking about how he put her up in the attic. Yeah, this is it. So over time, their roles reversed, and his mum came to fear him. Eventually, he also admitted that he had later locked his mum in the attic and bricked up her windows after telling neighbours that she had died, and he kept her locked in there until she died in 1980. It is unknown how long Fritzl kept his mum locked up in his attic, but newspapers have speculated that it may have been up to 20 years. So during his prison stint from the earlier R-word conviction, the one where he attacked that mother with the baby next to the bed, he admitted that he planned to lock his daughter up so that he could contain and express his evil side. He said, "I was born to R-word, and I held myself back for a relatively long time." Remember, I'm not allowed to say the R-word, so I have to say R-word or R-worded. You guys know what I mean. He also said, "I could have behaved a lot worse than locking up my daughter." What? That is already pretty freaking heinous, man. The forensic psychiatrist diagnosed Josef as having a severe combined personality disorder, which included borderline schizoid types and sexual disorder, and recommended that he receive psychiatric care for the rest of his life. Later reports have revealed his premeditated plan to lock his daughter up was not for discipline, but for his own gratification, so his own sexual gratification. In an agreement that his daughter would never have to see her father again, Elizabeth gave videotaped testimony before Austrian prosecutors and investigators on the 11th of July 2008. On the 13th of November 2008, authorities in Austria released an indictment against Josef Fritzl. He stood trial for the murder of the infant, Michael, the one that he put into the furnace, who died shortly after he was born, and faced between 10 years and life imprisonment. He was also charged with the R-word, incest, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and slavery, which carry a maximum 20-year term. On the first day of Joseph's trial, he entered the courtroom attempting to hide his face from cameras behind a blue folder, which he was entitled to do so apparently under Austrian law. After opening comments, all journalists and spectators were asked to leave the courtroom, and Josef, he lowered his folder. So Josef Fritzl, he pleaded guilty to all charges with the exception of murder and grievous assault by threatening to gas his captives if they disobeyed him. In his opening remarks, Rudolf Meyer, the defending counsel, appealed to the jury to be objective and not be swayed by emotions. So he insisted that Josef was not a monster, stating that he had brought a Christmas tree down to his captives in the cellar during the holiday season. It's like, he's really clutching at straws, right? Like, yeah, that's gonna make it all better, bringing a Christmas tree down. Oh my god. So Christiane Birkenshire, the prosecuting her first case since being appointed chief prosecutor, pressed for life imprisonment in an institution for the criminally insane. She demonstrated for jurors the low height of the ceiling in the cellar dungeon by making a mark on the door to the courtroom at 174 centimeters, and described the cellar as damp and moldy, passing around a box of musty objects taken from the cellar. The smell was apparently really bad, and it made a few of the jurors flinch and gag. And these, you know, Elizabeth was in there for 24 years. Like, her lungs will be fudged. So on the first day of testimony, jurors watched 11 hours of testimony recorded by Elizabeth in sessions with police and psychologists in July 2008. The tape is said to have been so harrowing that the 8 jurors did not watch more than 2 hours at a time. 4 replacement jurors were on standby to replace any of the regular jurors in case they could not bear to hear any more of the evidence. Apparently it was really, really bad. Besides the video testimony, Elizabeth's older brother, Harold, testified and said that he was also physically abused by their dad as a child. Joseph's wife, Rosemary, and Elizabeth's kids, they refused to testify. I understand the kids. I feel like Rosemary might be a little bit, I don't know. I don't want to say. Anyway, on the 18th of March 2009, Elizabeth attended the second day of the criminal trial against her dad in preparation for a book that she wrote about her ordeal. Josef Fritzl's attorney confirmed that Elizabeth had actually been in the visitors gallery in disguise at the time her video testimony was aired. Josef Fritzl recognized that Elizabeth was in court, and from this point on, you could see Josef going pale, and apparently he broke down. It was a meeting of eyes that changed his mind. So Elizabeth and Joseph's eyes met, and he was just like, fudge. And the next day, he began the proceedings by approaching the judge and changing his pleas to guilty on all charges. On the 19th of March 2009, Josef was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 15 years. He said that he accepted the sentence and would not appeal. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and her children, they started intense therapy. Josef Fritzl, he is still alive and is reportedly suffering from dementia behind prison walls. It's kind of annoying that, like, you know, you get dementia, you forget things. It sucks that he's going to be able to forget what he did. It's like, I kind of want him to remember it, so he's stuck with, you know, what he's done. Anyway, there are some other possible victims of Josef. I'll go over them now. So on November the 12th, 1986, at 6:40 a.m., 17-year-old Martina Claudia Poch left her home to go to a nearby bus stop. When she did not show up for an arranged meeting with her boyfriend, he called Martina's mum, who thought her daughter was already with her boyfriend. She later learned that her daughter had not shown up for work that day, and authorities were also able to determine through witness statements that she had not been on the bus that morning either. So on November the 22nd, 1986, 2 scuba divers, they found her body. It was wrapped in 2 olive green tarpaulins on the southern shore of Lake Mondsee. The forensic examination revealed that she had been killed by strangulation 2 hours after leaving her parents' home. After his arrest, Josef Fritzl, he was investigated for possible involvement in Martina's death, since at the time of the murder, he and his wife ran a guest house, which was located opposite where her body was actually found. And she was also very physically similar to his daughter Elizabeth. In addition to Martina's homicide, Josef was looked into as a suspect in the death of 17-year-old Anna Neumayer, who was killed with a captive bolt pistol in a field in Lines on August 17th, 1966. She had disappeared on her way to Wells, which was 35 kilometers from where Josef Fritzl actually worked at the time. Another potential victim was 42-year-old Gabriella Subvoka, who was a prostitute that was murdered in August of 2007. Her body was found at the Lipno Reservoir at a time that Josef was actually on holiday there. However, he was ultimately not charged with these killings due to lack of evidence. So, yeah, maybe one day. We'll see. So Elizabeth and her children, they're still undergoing intensive therapy. They reportedly suffer from intense anxiety and panic attacks from the sound of a door closing or the turning of a lock. They live in a location designated by Austrians as Village X, so that the family can live a normal life supported by the Austrian state and relatively free of public scrutiny. Elizabeth has also reportedly found love. So she found love in the bodyguard that was hired by the government to protect her. If anyone deserves happiness and love after such a horrible life, it's her, honestly. Elizabeth is a potent symbol of strength. She is the embodiment of a positive life after decades of abuse. Josef Fritzl will not have the last word in this. As he rots in hell where he belongs, he will not have the last word. No, that last word goes to Kirsten, the girl who was so sick, she ended up in a coma. When she woke from her coma, she said, "A new life is starting for all of us. Let us be happy." Remember, Kirsten was very sick? Yeah, she had the last word. Factors that traumatized the upstairs children include learning that Josef had lied to them about their mother abandoning them, the abuse they had received from him during their childhood, and finding out that their other siblings had been imprisoned in the cellar. The downstairs children received therapy due to their deprivation from normal development, the lack of fresh air and sunshine while living confined in the basement, and the abuse that they and their mother had received from Josef when he came into the basement. Elizabeth was said to be estranged from her mum Rosemary, who accepted the story about Elizabeth joining a cult and did not pursue the matter further, but Elizabeth allows her 3 children who grew up in Josef and Marie's care to visit their grandma regularly. So apparently Rosemary now lives alone in a small apartment. Yeah. Oh my god, so many thoughts going through my head after that story. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts on this whole thing? My goodness. Mental. I don't understand it. I don't understand how you can do that kind of shit to your kids. Come on, like, oh. I've got an opinion on her mum too. Of course I do. I have an opinion on everything, but I think I might keep my opinion to myself. I might put it in the comments. Let's talk about it. Let's have a chat. Anyway, that is the story for today. The horrific case of Josef. Oh, gross. Yuck. And he's ugly as F. Oh, his daughter deserves so much better. All of these kids, like, so he had 7 kids with his daughter. He had 7 kids with his wife. It's like 14 kids. That's too many children for this horrible person. He shouldn't have had any kids. He shouldn't have been allowed to have kids. See, this is the stuff that makes me doubt things. Like, yeah. I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to go into my doubts of religion. Anyway, I hope you guys are doing well. I have Maggie here today. You want to see? Here she is. Maggie. Okay, that's me. I hope you guys have a wonderful morning, day, night, whatever it is where you are, and I will be talking to you later. Please remember to like and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye.